operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the top features in the Mobile Composer Agent Desktop Solutions conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. If anyone should need assistance during the call, please press *0 to reach an operator. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. Jason Ouimet and Mr. Jeff Fontenot. Gentlemen, please begin.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today for the webinar. Again, as Bonnie stated, housekeeping, all lines will be muted to cut down background noise. You'll notice a QA button in the upper left-hand portion of your screen. You can use that to submit questions. We will reserve time at the end of the presentation to address those questions. This presentation will also be made available on the Noble Users Group website in the coming days. Presenting today, myself, Jeff Fontenot. I'm the Director of Business Development and Inside Sales for Noble Systems. I'm also an active end user of Composer and the technologies that we create. Joining me today is Jason Ouimet, Director of Product Management for Noble Systems. Jason has been with Noble for nearly a decade, and he's worked with Composer since the original version was created. Jason, thank you for bringing your knowledge to the webinar today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The agenda for today's call is a brief history of Noble Composer, a high-level overview of the top features in Composer. We'll take a deeper dive into those features, and then lastly, we'll end with a QA session and address those questions that you may have.
So we're going to move into the history of Composer, and thank you very much, Jeff, for the introduction. I'd like to talk to you about, where did Composer come from, when did it start, etc. The development started for Composer in 2005. When we created Composer, we had some underlying goals that we wanted to achieve. First piece was we wanted Composer to be very easy to use, and we wanted to make it so that you can create any agent desktop that you could envision using the tool. So easy customization was a big piece for us. We also wanted to allow for database write-back. So any type of object that would allow you to write back to a database, we wanted to make sure that we could support. So if you needed to collect a payment, if you needed to change a phone number, any of those items would be available through the UI for your customization. Another big piece for us from a development perspective was to have both a thin and thick client support. We wanted our customers that weren't ready to invest in a web infrastructure to be able to continue to use a thick client, a Windows-based installation. And those that are ready to get with a web-based installation, people that were using distributed call centers throughout the world, to have an agent desktop that was available to be used via a web infrastructure. Over the course of time, there's been over 35,000 hours of development on Composer. And in the Composer suite, between all the agent desktop applications, between Win, Web, the Mimic Designer, and the actual Composer Screen Designer, there are 375,000 lines of code. Previous versions of Composer were Composer 8, which was a Windows-based agent client, and Composer 9, which was our web-based agent client. Now, both of them had a different designer. So if an agent or a customer was moving from 8 to 9, they did have to learn a new designer. What we presently have, and what we're now pushing for all of our customers, is Composer X, which is a combination of Web and Win, and they both use the same designer.
It's apparent that a tremendous amount of design, planning, and development effort has gone into the latest version of Composer. Let's take a closer look at some of those high-level features.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Some of the big pieces, like we talked about, was that there's one designer for both the web and the thick client Windows installation. When you create campaigns within Composer X, you can decide how you want to create them. Are they going to be used for Windows agents only, web agent, or how we would always recommend is create it for both. So that way, if our customers have a scenario where they have a Windows-only installation, and eventually they may want to move into web, they could do so. Also new in Composer X was a security enhancements. One was a read-only policy. Perhaps you may have scenarios where you want to give a user the ability to see what you've created for a campaign and what screens are available, but you don't want them to be able to make any changes. You can now do that with the Composer Designer in Composer X. Also, Composer X does not require an ODBC DSN be configured. It natively creates the database connection right in the application just by specifying the system name that you'd like to connect to. We added in language localization for both the designer and the agent clients. So now you can put in new language packs. If you have distributed call centers throughout the world that may be speaking different languages, those agents can see the tooltips and the buttons and everything labeled in the language that they expect to see it in. We also added in screen focus events. How this is very useful is if you have a scenario where your agents are using Composer and maybe having another application up and working on it, maybe your system of work. If they're working on that system of work and they get connected to call, we can pop Composer into their view so that they know, hey, I'm connected to a call. Or if they're working on their system of work and they have a callback that they need to dial for, we can pop that Composer into screen so they see that callback notification. We also added in additional actions and events such as a print screen action and a callback failure event.
All right, very good. So let's take a look at the top features in Composer, starting with easy customization, ease of campaign deployment, multiple client deployment options, real-time updates to multiple data sources, workflow optimization, as well as desktop unification. Let's go ahead and start with easy customization.
When we talk about easy customization, as we talked about, one of our development goals was to provide an easy-to-use interface, and we believe that we've achieved that goal. One thing that you can do with Composer is you can create an unlimited number of screens. So based off of what you've put in for your agent and your workflow, an agent can navigate from one screen off to the 50th screen that you created, where another agent, based off the input that they put in, can navigate from the first screen over to the second screen. There is no limitation on the number of screens that you can create within the tool. We also made sure that all of the user input and display options that you would normally expect to see in a user interface are available via these screen objects. Those objects include buttons, checkboxes, combo boxes, data grids. We put in support for embedded web pages, very similar to what you would see with one web page inside of another. Labels, list boxes, panels, so that you can group multiple objects together in one subsection of the screen, radio buttons, tab controls, and text boxes. We also allow you to further customize all of the screens and objects that are on the screen. So if you drag an object onto the screen, you can choose to change the background color, the font color, the size of the screen object. All of these objects have base set properties, but there's also additional properties that you can choose to modify as you drag them onto the screen. Also, from a customization perspective, we also put in advanced scripting. The advanced scripting allows you to further customize the campaign without having to know a programming language. In this next slide here, we'll show you an example. You can see on the left-hand side, where you see this black box, this is a campaign with a number of screens. In fact, there's so many screens that you actually don't see them all here. You're not required to create this many screens, but if you choose to, you can create a campaign with all the different types of screens that are required for use for your agents. In the next slide here, you can see down at the bottom, here are all the objects that you can use to drag onto the screen. So when we talked about those buttons, checkboxes, labels, all of them are there. Simply click on one of those objects, and then you can drag it onto your screen for additional use. And to the right, you'll see the properties. As we talked about, you have the options to change the background color, potentially put in a background image if you're making modifications to a screen. What's your default font, the font color, and the size. And finally, this gets into, we talked about scripting. Scripting is very simple. You right-click on an event in Composer. An event could be something such as I've got connected to a call, or an event could be something like I've clicked on a button. Once you have that, it's very easy to use. Right-click, add an action, and pick an action from one of the subcategories within the campaign. So very quick and easy to create an application with a lot of control over what your agents are doing. Next big piece that we want to talk about was ease of campaign deployment.
So I'm sorry, Jason, just to interject, as an end user of the actual technology, it's apparent to me that really anyone with minimal training or minimal technical skills in the background can create very effective, very powerful strips. As we move into the ease of campaign deployment, you speak to those high-level features as well.
Yeah, sure. So we'll, many customers create multiple campaigns for their users. And sometimes, their call center may require that they have hundreds of campaigns, but really they only want them to work with one set of screens. One of the great things that Composer has is a feature and functionality we call campaign substitution. What this allows you to do is create one set of screens and then map that campaign to multiple campaigns. So essentially, you make changes to one campaign, it saves out to many more, potentially hundreds if you've configured it to do so. One other big piece for campaign deployment is a lot of times you may be concerned, well, did I do something that doesn't quite work? Composer X has a nice feature in there called a campaign validation grid. And what the campaign validation grid does is show you any errors that may be available or in your campaign so that you can go and fix them. We also have a backup and restore functionality. So when you save a campaign each time, it'll prompt the user for a note as to what did you change. So you can put in IOI added a label to screen A. If you made a mistake and it wasn't working in the floor, it's no problem. It's very easy to restore. You can just simply go to our restore functionality and restore to the version that it had before the problem was introduced. You can see here is a good screen of the campaign substitution. You have your target campaign and which campaigns will use your target campaign. Simply just pick the master campaign at the top, and then you can easily go down and check each other campaign that should be using that as a master campaign. We talked about the validation grid. By default, if things aren't properly configured on a campaign, we have a validation. You'll have warning and errors. In this specific example, you'll see that we have some warnings that are letting us know that, hey, you didn't define an initial screen. What is the screen that you want to show when the call first gets connected? You can also see that an inbound query wasn't defined, so whoever created this campaign would want to define an inbound query if this campaign was going to receive inbound calls. We talked earlier about the backup and restore functionality. The backup and restore functionality will prompt the user upon each save. On the left side image here, you can see what are your comments? Well, we created a new order entry screen. On the right-hand side would be the scenario if we wanted to roll back. If we wanted to roll back to the previous version, you can simply go to the restore and pick the version of that campaign that you want to roll back to, and it'll put the screen changes right back to where it was before.
It's pretty impressive, the ability to create those types of campaigns and then to deploy those scripts along with that assurance and validation, that backup restore, certainly can make life much easier for many of our customers, especially as things change in the business operation environment all the time. So another item you touched on is the fact that we have Composer 8 and Composer 9, a thick client and a web client. And I understand Composer X allows customers to choose between the two clients. Can you elaborate more on this?
Sure. One of the big pieces that we wanted to solve with Composer X is give the clients and our customers multiple deployment options. And so, as we talked about, there's a Windows thick client and a web-based agent client. Now, if you set up your campaigns so that they're configured for both, meaning that the campaign can be used for both web and Win, your agents could be using the web client, and some agents could be using the thick client, and they wouldn't really know any difference except for one launched a browser while another launched an application. Now, why is this important? Well, it allows your company, if you're not ready to invest in a web server, to use all of the functionality and all the features and flexibility of Composer without having to purchase that web server or web servers. For customers that do have a web server, for their land-based agent, it gives you a little bit of a disaster recovery where those agents can use the thick client in the event that your web server infrastructure went down. One thing that's very nice about the web-based infrastructure is it's much easier to deploy. Right? If we need to do an upgrade, it's just the website that needs to be upgraded. If there are any new features that you want to try out, a secondary website could be created with that new version so that some agents could log on to that new second website while the rest are staying on the production website. And when you're ready, you can have them move into move all the files from the secondary website into the primary site. Composer 8 and Composer 9 can run simultaneously with Composer X. The screen data is stored in separate tables. So if you wanted to upgrade to Composer X but were worried about doing a hard cut, that's no problem. You can make sure that you have your screens created for Composer X and have some of your agents logged onto Composer X for a campaign while the rest are still using Composer 8 or Composer 9, whatever's in your environment. And then allow your agents to eventually move over to Composer X as you build that confidence. You can see here's an example of a campaign that's using our Windows agent. The next slide is going to show you that same campaign run in a web agent. Pretty much the only thing that you can see that's different is that this is running in Firefox, where in the previous slide it was using an actual Windows-based installation. Which moves us into our next section, which is to talk about our...
Yeah, sorry about that, Jason. So for most of our customers, interfacing with third-party data sources and application, it's critical. It's a reality in operation. As I understand, Composer X has an increased capability in this area. Can you share with us a little bit more about that, please?
Sure, absolutely. As we talked about in the development goals, we wanted to make sure that we supported direct database connectivity. Right out of the box, we support direct database connectivity to our Atomics database, MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, and PostgreSQL. We also support connectivity using a generic ODBC driver. What that means is if you want to connect to an Oracle, a Sybase, some other database that has an ODBC driver, we can connect to it with Composer and update or select data out of that database as needed. We are coming forward in our next major release, which is version 1.2. We're actually in the process of testing it now, is SOAP-based web services. We see a lot of customers that are using applications that the database is closed off. We can't get access via ODBC, but they will allow us to update data or select data from that database using SOAP-based web services. So now within Composer, there's a new option to allow you to incorporate those SOAP-based web services to read and write data directly to those infrastructures. In this piece here, you can see we have our database connection builder. Here we have Atomic selected. You'll see all of our connections that are down below, but you can also see that we support MySQL, our generic ODBC, Postgres, and SQL Server. Below that, you can see that we have a web services action. So now when you go to your actions list and you see web, you'll also have a SOAP-based web service, which will allow you to select that SOAP web service for continued functionality. In this next slide, you can see this is where we have our SOAP discovery method. Where is the WSDL? Is the WSDL published on a public website, or do we discover it from a WSDL file that we have on the PC? You can do either or. Web services can also be done over a secure connection. If there's a secure web service that needs to use a certificate, we can do that along with passing credentials. On the bottom right-hand image here, you can see that once we've declared the web service that we want to call, what's the method that we want to utilize, and what are our inputs and outputs. And you can declare those in a very easy-to-use graphical user interface to configure that communication.
That's great. I suspect that most people on the call today will benefit from that ability to interact with third-party data sources and applications. So, Jason, we talked about easy customization. We've talked about deployment. But what about the tools that the agents use in the workflow process?
Sure. So with all the tools that we give you with the the various objects you can drag on the screen, the advanced scripting, we really wanted to make sure that you could also focus on workflow optimization, allowing you to create the screens that your agents are going to use and guide your agents to say the right things. Stick to the script. Many of you may have mini Mirandas that need to be read for certain regions that they may be calling. Composer will help you drive your agents to doing those things. We also want you to help have the script drive your agents to input the data that's required. If you're collecting a payment, make sure that they input all the items that are required for a payment. data validation as well. So when your agents are collecting data, if they're collecting a credit card number, making sure that it's actually a valid credit card number that they're collecting. If they're adding in a payment by check, making sure that we have the correct ABA routing number. Date validation, if you want to make sure we have a valid expiration date or that the date's within a certain range, you can do that within Composer. And also if they're collecting an email address, do we have a valid email address? Do we have an @ with a domain? And then finally, with workflow optimization, another big piece that we put in was contact management. We have a number of customers that may have accounts that are owned by an agent or a group of agents, and they want to allow those agents to work the most effective accounts and let them have control over how they work those accounts. Contact management is a tool that we put in that allows those agents to do that, and we'll show you a slide about how that works and describe that a little bit further down here. In this example here, we can see that we have a scenario where the agents are required to say a mini Miranda. So when a call comes up that requires them to say a mini Miranda, we can pop it on their screen that says, read this mini Miranda, and we won't let them proceed unless they click yes. When they click yes, it'll pop more information on the screen that will allow them to continue with their script. Once they've clicked yes, you can see that we've now shown them a tab control to put in additional information. In this case, you can see as an example of our data validation, the agent put in ted@ted. Well, there's no .com. It's not a valid email address. So it's marked in red so that they know that they need to fill that out before proceeding. You can also indicate which items you expect to be completed by the agents for data input. I've seen some great examples by some of our customers that actually use color codes in the middle of text boxes to let them know which pieces they expect them to fill out, and they highlight the ones in green and leave the other ones as white so the agents know, okay, I put in my name, now when they hit tab, now address goes to green, so they know where to focus on and put in the information. This isn't necessarily a requirement for you to do, but it's one of those things that you can really put in place to help control the workflow, make sure you're collecting the right information, or potentially making sure that your agent's focus on the script is in the right spot. When we talked about contact management, it provides your agents the ability to work multiple owned accounts or pooled accounts and identify which accounts have already been worked. You can see here, here's a data grid of a contact management grid that your agents could see potentially. There are different colors within this grid. There's white ones. Those are records that have never been worked. There's a red one that indicates, okay, that account's already been worked to completion. No reason for me to work this again. There's records that are gray. Those are accounts that have already been reviewed, but not necessarily marked for not working anymore for the current day. And then the one that's green is what they're currently working. You can change those colors so there's something more reflective to how your operations will work. It doesn't have to be red, gray, green. It can be any color scheme that you'd like. The key here, though, is that you can easily put in the information that you need for your agents, and they can filter down within this grid to find the accounts that they're looking for, potentially looking for the highest balance accounts and work those first. Again, it gives you all the workflow management that your agents would need, filtering down to the items that they would need to look for displayed within this data grid.
So this Composer X provides this advanced ability to create application-like tools for agents. It also ensures that key elements of the workflow are being performed with validation and so forth. But what about customers with existing applications that must run in the call center environment, third-party applications?
That's a great question. That's another big piece that we like to focus on with Composer, which is desktop unification. You can unify your desktop with many tools. We already talked about database connectivity and the various forms that you can connect to a database with ODBC or web services. We can also launch external applications from within Composer. So if there is an application that needs to be used, we can launch that application. We can also communicate via web services. We support both SOAP-based and RESTful web services to communicate to those applications. We also have unification for SMS and email. You can use our ERMS product to get multimedia messages into Composer and read and respond to those messages. And finally, we have our Noble Mimic product. Noble Mimic allows you to read and write directly to 3270, 5250, and VT100 terminals. And while doing that, making it so that your agents don't actually have to see those old green screen terminals. And we talked about the database connectivity. Here's another example again of here's your database connection string. You can connect with ODBC and read and write directly to that database, and potentially maybe only read if your database securities are set in a manner that won't allow us to update the database, or you don't want an agent to be able to update. That's fine. We can build a connection with a view-only connection. We can also launch executables and pass arguments to make sure that the correct items are launched. So in this example here, you can see we did a launch executable action, and then we passed arguments to that application. So we're passing it an account number to a value that we have in Composer, and we're passing it to the path of the executable that we'd like to launch. Another way that some people might be familiar with is with our WinScrape product, which will send keyboard commands directly to an application. There's multiple ways that this program launch can be used. But if your application allows us to launch it and pass it an account number, then we can absolutely launch it from within Composer and provide a screen pop right from there. When we talked about web services, we've shown you an example here of a SOAP-based web service where we've declared the WSDL that we'd like to use for web service communication. You can also use RESTful type web services and manually create that web service communication to that RESTful web service. We also have unification with multimedia. You can see here that the agent got connected to a call, which the call was actually not a non-voice call. It was an email. On the left-hand side, you can see that this was the email from the client saying, "Hi, my name is Daryl. Can you tell me if my credit card application was approved?" To the right, the agent has a response. Now, they have a little text box in the middle there that you could easily create to create canned responses, or the agent can type in that text box and put in the information. Again, that's all customizable, and it's the flexibility that you have within Composer from a unification standpoint. That same item that you saw for an email, you can do the same thing for SMS. So in this scenario, we have an SMS that came in with the text that the SMS sent, and then we can choose to send a reply with a canned response or allow the agent to manually type within the body. And then finally, we talked about Mimic briefly, which allows us to create campaigns that read and write to VT100 and 3270 and 5250 terminals. One of the big pieces with Mimic is you can see here we have an easy-to-use designer to define where we're going to read from and where we're going to write from. Simply move your mouse over these objects, and it will automatically detect which items are writable and which items are readable. Once you have those items and you've worked with the scripting, your agents could be working with a 3270 terminal and not even realize it because they're not having to type in it. You can put user interface options like text boxes, labels, combo boxes, items that agents would expect to use in a user interface, and have all of those items automatically send the commands to this old green screen application. Why we feel this is very valuable? Well, a lot of our customers have these old legacy applications. They'd like to get off of them, but they also don't want to have a scenario where they have to retrain their agents. So what a lot of our customers will do is they'll use Mimic. They'll completely hide the terminal screen from their agents, and it cuts down on their training costs. And while they're moving over to a new application that doesn't require this green screen, they can build a screen within Composer that's identical to what they used with the green screen application, and the agents have no idea that they're using a new application in the background at this point. They can, if we move to a modern system with an open database or web services, those communications can happen instead of communicating to a 3270 screen. Additional web or unification types is web-based applications can be unified using a web browser control in Composer. So if you'd like to embed a third-party application, you could do so using that embedded web control within Composer and navigate through.